So there are a variety of ways that people have tried to modify their plants. Usually this comes down to food plants. And so I'll give you some examples of what's been done. This is one, modifying plants to adjust them to the environment. One of the limitations of crops is growing crops where they can be in a suitable environment. So plants need they have a certain tolerance of wetness and dryness, of heat and cold. And so adjusting those to be more flexible or put them into environments where they typically haven't grown before. This is an area of research. So if you could grow plants in sandier soils or drier habitats or something like that, then suddenly you have new places where you can plant crops, new people in the world who currently can't grow crops on the scale that other places do. They might be unable to do this. So some modifications here, just from a paper, you can follow this link. Um, Adjusting the stomata that's going to be involved with water loss, locating other modifications that would benefit a dry environment, so deeper root system, etc. Um, Again, you kind of, if you can picture it happening in one organism, you might be able to transfer it into another organism. So there are plants that grow in deserts, but that overlap between desert plants and crop plants usually isn't too great. Here's another one. They talk about hacking photosynthesis. So we know a lot about how photosynthesis works. There's a lot of organisms in the world that can do photosynthesis. And so this will have different abilities based on wavelengths of light that can be absorbed, or efficiency of carbon fixation, things like that. So there've been quite a few studies that have tried to improve the efficiency of photosynthesis, and sometimes even to modify the process above what has ever been observed in a living organism. We could potentially actually manufacture a new version of photosynthesis based on the existing version. This one's received a lot of attention. This was kind of one of the bigger high profile examples of genetic engineering. And it's a endeavor called golden rice, where they're trying to take nutrients and put them into rice. So rice, as we talked with human nutrition, is great for energy. It's got starch that can be converted into sugar, that can be converted into energy. But on the whole, the grains are not super rich in other molecules you might need as a human, your vitamins and so on. So you can just see it's pure white. And I don't know, some of the more interesting plant nutrients come in as colors. So they took a research approach, and they took a molecule or took a molecular pathway, and they actually took it out of daffodils. So daffodils, very distant relatives of rice, and they took the ability of the daffodils to put yellow into their petals, and they put that into rice, and that caused the rice grains to basically put in the pigment into the rice, which happens to be, as you can see on the right here, these pigments are involved in synthesizing beta carotene, which becomes one of our vitamins that people need. So adding vitamins to rice in a natural format by giving them the genetic tools to do that, borrowed from another organism. And so that would stand to offer nutrients to people in places if they don't have a lot of variety in their diet. If they're growing only rice, which some people are living on almost entirely rice, then this would give them a chance to continue eating mostly rice, but get more nutrients out of it. Defending against weeds. So one of the big concerns with growing crops is that you have to maintain your crops and defend them against weed attacks. And a lot of money is devoted to herbicides and so on, to destroying competition for your crop plants. And there have been some technological advances about that. So this is one illustrating this herbicide known as glyphosate, and that's the same thing as the trade name of Roundup. And what it does is it inhibits a really basic molecular process in plants, the synthesis of, as you can see on the right here, these amino acids, tyrosine, phenylalanine, tryptophan. So being able to make those, that's important to being alive. And putting glyphosate in there, this would be lethal for most plants. And so that in itself, not too impressive We have a way to kill plants. We have quite a few ways to kill plants. The bioengineering advance of this is the development of this so-called Roundup Ready, um, basically a molecule format where they take, as you can see here, an enzyme from a bacterial cell, Agrobacterium, and it does the same step in this process, but it's not the plant version, and it's not susceptible to the glyphosate. So you engineer your plants to be able to grow even if they're doused in glyphosate, and that's a very narrow number of plants. It's basically only the ones that you've programmed to be resistant. And so you can genetically engineer, let's say you're growing corn, you engineer your corn to be glyphosate resistant or so-called Roundup ready, and then you spray your field with Roundup and everything is dead except for your corn. So it's a really efficient from a herbicide spraying standpoint, very nice advance where you don't have to worry about what you're spraying. You just spray indiscriminately and rely on your genetically engineered crops to survive the spraying. Another version of defending, let's see, we have defending against weeds and defending against herbivores. So another big crop plant. We have herbicides which defend against plants and insecticides or pesticides that defend against insects or just generally speaking pests. And same thing that requires a lot of spraying and so on, chemicals. And so there have been a couple ways that researchers have developed to basically teach the plants to defend themselves in a way that's really powerful. So we have some toxic plants. Usually the toxicity of plants and plants that we eat, those don't overlap too much. So corn plants, for example, aren't terribly defended on their own. We don't want to put a whole lot of toxins into the plants that we're eating. But they developed this system where they take a toxin from bacteria. So they basically have the gene that teaches the plants to make this toxin, and they make their own toxin, and insects that try to eat them, such as this caterpillar here, they get the toxin in their system and they die. So we basically have genetically taught plants to produce a toxin, and that causes the animals to die by eating the crops. Here's another version. So similar thing, is just a toxic molecule. This one came from spiders, as you can see. And same thing, engineer it into the plants, and then animals that try to eat the plants will then get killed from that. So genetically modified organisms have become very popular, as you might imagine.